All right, everyone. So we have another video here from Seth the Programmer, and this one is interesting because it's a debate that I've seen people have before, online when you're just scrolling online. And if you are, if you're someone who follows anime and manga like I do, you've probably seen people debate this, whether it's Goku versus Saitama or Goku versus this person, Goku versus Superman, or in one case Saitama versus Superman. They always do this, and for me this is interesting because like Saitama so far hasn't really shown anything to where he can actually compete with Goku. You know what I mean? Like he's shown some impressive things, but nothing on the level of what Goku has shown, especially with the Dragon Ball Super manga and how it's excuse me, continuously shown Goku just getting stronger and stronger and stronger to the point where he's a lot of people would say that he's pretty much multiversal at this point, like with how much he's grown. And I don't really see Saitama being able to compete with that, because all the feats that we've seen him perform up until this point in the One Punch Man manga, while they are impressive, don't get me wrong, like they're nowhere near the level of feats that Goku has shown now. I mean, even with the more recent chapters, which I won't get into detail about what happened in them because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read them, which, by the way, I highly recommend. If you haven't, go read them. Trust me, it's really good. It's really, really good. Even with what happened in those recent chapters, I still don't see Saitama actually being able to beat Goku. Now, granted, we've never seen Saitama at like full power, and I mean full power. Like, it's made clear to us, the audience, that this is the peak of Saitama's power. We've never seen that, so we're gonna have to wait. We're gonna have to wait until we do see Saitama at full power and then compare him to Goku. Although even if, let's say, him at full power is able to take out Goku, it's not really gonna mean much because, well, the Dragon Ball series is still going. And as we know, as per usual when it comes to a lot of shonen series, the character is just gonna keep getting stronger as long as it's still going. So I don't know, it should be interesting, but let's go ahead and see what Seth has to say. But before we do, guys, as always, you know what to do: like, share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, comment down below with your thoughts. All those things really go a long way in helping push this video out in the algorithm. That's why we have to keep asking you to, like, share, and subscribe. And let's go ahead and watch this video.
Imagine that you just finished reading the original Dragon Ball manga and watched Goku grow up from some naive kid in the jungle who didn't even know what a girl was to fighting a god-slaying demon with the whole universe cheering for him near the end, and then going to raise its reincarnation, named Oob, as the strongest person in the whole universe, looking for more. However, many years or chapters it took afterwards, you then begin your next read-through of a new series. You go in expecting another journey of growth like many shonen you've seen already, but this time, instead of starting from the bottom, this character is already at the top. A character who is already the strongest in the story from the get-go. A second lap for shonen fans that shouldn't have to start over. If you were to throw Goku at the end of the story...
Well, I mean, for me personally, I think that this is like probably the most interesting part of the
instead of starting from the bottom, this character is already at the top.
I mean, for me, this is, I think, what a lot of people find really interesting about the One Punch Man manga and the character of Saitama, is that he already starts off being incredibly powerful. As opposed to, like he said, with typical shonen, they start off at one point and then they continuously grow stronger until they get to the end of the series where they're like really broken. They're the arguably the strongest character of the series, like Dragon Ball, Naruto, Bleach. Well, Bleach, I guess after Yuha dies, you could argue that Ichigo is the strongest. It depends on who you ask. But they always end up incredibly broken at the end of the series. But here in One Punch Man, Saitama's already there. And it asks the question of, what happens to these characters afterwards? You know, like what happens to them after they gain their incredible strength? Like you would think that it would be kind of boring. And I guess if you ignore a series like, you know, Dragon Ball Super and Boruto, where they just decide, oh, well, we're just going to introduce like stronger characters. And I mean, for me, this is where I think One Punch Man actually does it right, as opposed to Boruto and Dragon Ball Super, where they said, we're just going to introduce even stronger characters and then have them, you know, compete against those. They actually decided to do something even more interesting, in my opinion. And yeah, but it's whatever. So that's just I think for me, just one of the reasons why I think so many people find Saitama so interesting is because it does ask the question of what happens after. Like, okay, you've got this god level strength, and every opponent you face off against is nothing. Like they're no challenge, and yeah, it's going to be pretty boring. And you actually see that with Saitama, which I think makes his character really really interesting, especially when you throw him among a lot of other protagonists in manga. Let's go ahead and continue.
A character who is already the strongest shouldn't have to start over. If you were to throw Goku at the end of the story and pit him against the terrible Demon King Piccolo, the dominator of the universe Frieza, or the culmination of the past generation in Cell, Goku should be able to deal with them in one punch, if not even less maybe. But this doesn't just apply to Goku. What about Naruto or Ichigo from Bleach? What if you put Naruto after reaching the end of his story against the Demon of the Mist Zabuza, Gaara of the Sand, or the leader of the Akatsuki Pain? Surely, it would still be no contest. Same applies to Bleach or really almost any battle shonen out there. This concept is one's vision of Saitama in One Punch Man, a protagonist that starts at the end game, but still has to live through the story with how it would affect him and others. If Goku was in the same position as Saitama is, he would more than likely be very, very bored. And that's exactly
really
Saitama's predicament throughout the story of One Punch Man. Murata often compares Goku and Saitama as two carefree characters that live for the excitement, but are often too strong for the people around them. And whenever you see them, you feel as though everything will be okay. But even though Murata, the artist of the One Punch Man manga, compares them, how would they actually stack up against each other in a fight, or even just comparing their stories? Would it be over in one punch? One Punch Man is an ongoing series, so it's impossible to say for certain what Saitama's max limit in combat is, nor am I gonna act like I know it. But that doesn't stop people from arguing about this subject. If someone put a questionable device to my head and forced me to answer, or else, this is what I would say. Whether it be potential King Piccolo jokes or possible Attack on Titan references, Saitama has one-shotted many creatures in the story, regardless of whether or not they can destroy entire cities or mountains with no effort, and no matter what heroes these monsters defeated beforehand or struggled with, Saitama almost and not purposely seems to undermine everyone else with how effortlessly he disposes of every serious threat that everyone risks their lives fighting. Although to Saitama's credit, he does take a blow on purpose during the Deep Sea King fight by acting like he only won because every other hero before him weakened it. Even the dominator of the universe, who can either blow off the surface of the planet or destroy entire stars, depending on what guidebooks and translations you use, yada yada, gets one-tapped by a serious punch from Saitama, even when this same being Boros could launch Saitama to the moon at probably around light speed with a single kick. Even later, when the rank 2 hero and Esper, Tatsumaki, fights against the Monster King fused with another sidekick named Psycho.
Oh yeah, excuse me, I guess I should probably have said that this will contain possible spoilers for the One Punch Man manga, so if you're not caught up, just be warned before you continue with the video.
And splits a massive continental disc off the entire planet, Saitama is heavily implied to still be far stronger and deals with human monster Garo rather easily, who is considerably stronger than every other monster the heroes had to fight from the Monster Association. This is due to it being implied that Tatsumaki needs to be at full condition to deal with a guy named Golden something something and is fodder to even a not transformed monster Garo, blah blah. However, the unfortunate reality of this is that Saitama's feats still don't really compare to Goku's. Now, I'm not saying Goku wins just because he has better feats, but we need to get this feat part out of the way, obviously. In terms of feats, I think even the craziest of One Punch Man fans would agree Goku has more to offer. It's just the natural progression of the stories. Goku has had much more power progression and cliffing, whereas Saitama, despite being at his endgame power, does not need to use this endgame power against earlier villains in his series, so obviously Goku has more to showcase. And not only has Goku had more time to do so, but Goku has even gone beyond just his endgame version in terms of feats, and even got a blatant continuation to his story in Dragon Ball Super, where he even gets to display more feats on top of that. So it's pretty obviously in Goku's favor here, and not very fair to say. Now, not to say Dragon Ball Super continues after the end of Z, because obviously the end of Z is a time skip, but just in terms of being able to display more feats after his series was over. Goku similarly has had to fight beings who could vaporize entire cities, had to outscale people who could one-tap the moon, beings who could point or wave away entire planets, creatures that could obliterate solar systems, and even gods who could punch away the universe on accident. Even in terms of speed, Goku has had to dive past a universal body in the anime in quick succession, surpass the gods of destruction who could leap from the universe to outside of it almost instantaneously, and play with planets like ping pong, or even considering traveling the universe in a couple of minutes rather slow. In one instance, an assistant of one of these gods goes to fetch said god food 3 minutes away in another star system, and after getting impatient, the god of destruction appears there instantly within a minute. At least it's implied so. In Ultra Instinct, Goku's newest form, he easily reaches these levels, if not arguably beyond it, due to surpassing all of these gods of destruction through his battle with Jiren, a being above the gods. Not to say these gods of destruction couldn't have gotten stronger since then, but at the time since said feats were described, he is stronger than them. With Goku in just his Super Saiyan form against Beerus having a punch that contained power to destroy the entire universe, as described by the narrator numerous times, and only being hundreds to thousands of times stronger now with multiple transformations on top of that, you can see why Goku has this feat category a bit on lock, although as I said earlier, Saitama is in the early stages of his story and might show something crazy later on. This is just what we know at the moment. This is also important, but some people try to debate against Goku's feats quite often, and I feel like I will have to talk about this if I'm gonna try to end the topic for now. However, the basic outline of it is that Goku scales to people who can shake infinite voids, and the narrator clearly says Goku has punches that can obliterate the universe. It's not just Beerus, even though he surpasses Beerus, at least at this time later. The obvious narrative intent here is that Goku and Beerus' clash would threaten to annihilate the universe, as is shown in both the anime and manga under the original author's supervision. Toriyama literally put the universe-destroying punch in both versions when he didn't really have to. Yeah. Another one is that people think that Dispo, a creature from a tournament later on in Dragon Ball Super, which is stated to surpass the speed of sound and light, somehow downplays Goku because people are acting like being fast and light is impressive. However, not only does this statement simply say...
Well, I mean, these characters have already far surpassed the speed of light a long time ago. I mean, we're talking about people who have these incredible fights, and then the narrator says that, oh, only a minute's passed, which is something that honestly, like, a lot of people were really pissed off at when the anime was still being aired on, on Sundays. Like, a lot of people were kind of mad that the tournament was being sort of like dragged on for so long, and at the end they'll say, oh, only a minute's passed, and they're like, oh Jesus, like how long is left?
Dispo surpassed
yeah, all that's to say that these characters, like, this isn't really all that impressive because again, like, characters have already surpassed the speed of light a long time ago. Like, this isn't as impressive as it sounds.
Light, not the speed of light, he's just beyond it. But even if you steelman that and said Dispo, a fast character later in the series, was only the speed of light, this character struggles with characters much weaker and slower than Goku, that Goku himself surpasses many times over and would simply outscale Saitama even with that lowball. I outlined more of this scaling in my How Strong is Ultra Instinct Goku video, which you can watch here. Even with the concept of, say, God in the One Punch Man universe, or if you wanked it and said he was the universe itself and Saitama would one-shot it, it still wouldn't really compare to Goku currently. The next part is many people try to get into Saitama having no limits. However, if you've seen Dragon Ball, you know Goku doesn't really have limits either. And
Yeah,
the
I
whole
mean,
limit breaking concept.
he'll just get love this. He'll just get as strong as the series needs him to be. And this is something I feel like a lot of people really need to accept, because they'll always say, well, the author at one point said this about the character, and then that's it, like that's the be all end all. Well, actually, no, because the author could just as easily change their mind later on. Just because the author thinks one way at some point in the series doesn't mean that they're not going to change their mind later on. You see what I mean? Like, people seriously need to get this mindset out of their heads, or get this. Let me rephrase that. To get this idea out of their heads that once an author says something at one point, then that's it. That's the be all end all. Again, no. They could always change their minds. And at the end of the day, the author can do whatever the hell they want. Now, that doesn't mean you have to like it. I know there have been some times where authors have done things that I didn't like. I mean, really didn't like. But that doesn't mean that it's not what it is, because again, they're the author. They get to do whatever the hell they want. So, yeah, that whole thing that people have of, like I said, at one point the series said this, then that's it. That's the be all end all. You need to get that out of your head. Okay, trust me, it'll save you a lot of time and frustration.
In One Punch Man, Goku breaks his body's limits numerous times. He doesn't just break them one time, he breaks them numerous times. And in One Punch Man, breaking your limits doesn't make you omnipotent. We know Garo broke his limits and still could get a lot stronger, and Saitama still dealt with him with no problem. Boros with Meteoric Burst breaks his body's limits, and Saitama broke his body's limits, and there's still gaps between them. It doesn't make you omnipotent to have no limits in One Punch Man, so it's not really an argument. You guys get the point regardless. So from here, the next obvious argument to go over is not feats, but narrative implication. Perhaps it is simply Saitama's narrative that he must defeat everyone in one punch, or else he simply isn't Saitama. To get into this, we have to get into a lot of headcanon territory, as that's what these arguments are at the end of the day. As I outlined earlier, one, the actual author of the series, wanted Saitama to be an endgame level protagonist that has all of his power at the beginning, because it'd be more exciting for second time readers of a shonen series. He states that these endgame protagonists always seem to be able to beat everyone else and are the strongest. However, that statement would also apply to characters from other shonen series, not just One Punch Man, like Naruto, Ichigo, etc. So, even if they are beating everyone else and are considerably stronger, or potentially are the strongest in their story at the end, do we think that Naruto can beat everyone else in fiction because of this one statement?
No.
Does Goku beat everyone else in fiction? Ichigo? Not very likely. But if your name is James, don't answer that. I don't think one is trying to say that either, and nor do I think he's saying Saitama would solo stomp fiction. He's simply wanting his story to be in reverse, because it would be interesting. This usually gets into a lot of theories, as I said, but a good way to wrap up this particular argument is this. If Saitama's narrative is that he must win in one punch, then what about the characters that have to win narratively as well? Do they just cancel each other out? For instance, in the manga series Hajime no Ippo, there's a character called Takamura who is undefeatable so long as he sacrifices a piece of himself for a boxing match. Would this mean that if Saitama, even he, went all out against Takamura in a boxing match, he would lose so long as Takamura sacrificed a piece of himself? What about characters who always win due to luck, like Master Chief? Are these narratives superseded by the idea that Saitama has fought super strong giant monsters and Takamura hasn't? If feats are what matters, then why even bring up this narrative against Goku or other shonen characters then? The same would simply apply. Not only this, but Saitama doesn't really one-shot every villain anyway. Like, it's implied he might be able to with the Serious Punch, but say for instance, the Monster King Orochi, he says, oh, I don't have to take it easy on you because you're an actual monster. So he tries to kill him in one punch. Not a serious punch, but he tries to kill him in a punch. And Orochi survives. And that's how he comes back later and fuses with Psychos. He also tries to one-punch Supernatural Water, which he doesn't kill in one punch. He also didn't kill Boros in one punch. There's a lot of instances where he doesn't just kill people in one punch, even if it's implied he could at full power. It would also apply with characters who we don't know the upper limit of. For instance, Zeno is only stated to be undefeatable above everyone else and can erase every character in the show with zero effort in a series like Dragon Ball, which contains gag characters like Arale. And it's implied that this is the case because he's childish and goofy, showing a narrative even kind of above Saitama in terms of a debate like this. Does this mean Zeno inherently wins against Saitama? I don't think that's fair to say. In fact, I don't think using narrative in a versus vacuum is very reasonable at all, and seems to be less accurate than simply empirically gauging a character's actual shown strength. Of course, there's exceptions, especially when you're debating two characters from the same set of fiction, in which narrative is more important than in a crossverse debate, but I'll get more of what I mean concerning this particular matchup soon. The next argument is Saitama is a gag, so because it would be funny, he would win. I don't really want to get into Saitama as a gag character here, since it would be a long topic on its own. But the people who say this, I'm just gonna ask you, did you ever read the series? I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I had to reread this whole story just for this video alongside the webcomic, and I have zero idea where that's really coming from. Well, that's not true. I kind of understand, but it seems to be from a place of anime-only fandom and illiteracy. So, at the start of One Punch Man, Saitama is clearly displayed comedically with his goofy appearance, his contrast to other flashy shonen heroes and so on, which also helped make One popular to begin with, those types of characters that break the mold. Him beating people in One Punch is supposed to be the joke at first, but that joke starts to not become a joke anymore, and we start to feel bad for Saitama as the story keeps going on. With every chapter and villain Saitama one-shots, get the idea that Saitama's humanity is kind of withering away, and that is most evident after the martial arts tournament, in which a whole chapter is dedicated to Saitama's depression and King trying to cheer him up and help him discover something else he can try at. Despite during many fights earlier in the series, as I said, they are comedic, and even when you think Saitama is finally struggling or met an opponent that impresses him, this shocked demeanor turns out to be because he forgot about a sale or something, and then just one-shots whoever he's fighting, like, say, Carnage Kabuto. However, the Boros fight is very, very different, and so is the Garo fight later. Now, I blame the anime for this, but in the manga, and even the webcomic at some points, Saitama has a few more details that show his character during the whole Boros saga, per se. For one, when he meets Boros, he brings up the prophecy he heard, which led him across the universe, and upon hearing the prophecy, Saitama twitches in excitement. Boros then brings up a story about how he, like Saitama, defeated everyone rather easily and was bored. He was almost like an antagonistic parallel of Saitama, a hero nobody knew versus a villain nobody knew, having a limit-breaking deathmatch that nobody would see. At the beginning, the fight is still rather comedic. The famous "okay" line as Boros sheds his armor is iconic, but the rest of the fight ceases to be that comedic once Boros also starts to become more serious, as it's implied by Saitama that he already knew Boros wasn't trying his best either. Instead of Saitama acting like he's shocked because he forgot a sale like against Carnage Kabuto, he's shocked because Boros is genuinely stronger than he expected, in which Saitama even calls Boros strong not once, but twice after the "okay" line. This is once again in the manga only and not in the anime, but once Boros...
Which, once again, reinforces my statement of read the manga. Don't just watch the anime. Okay, you'd be surprised how much the anime changes. And because of those changes, you lose context, like what he just brought up here.
Then goes meteoric burst and shocks Saitama again. He kicks Saitama to the moon, and Saitama says, "This is almost a real fight." Which he then comes back
was
to
not
Earth.
in the anime.
Uses his ultimate technique, and Saitama uses a serious punch in response. Now, the translation of this panel is debated about, in which it can mean this is almost a real fight, or this is almost a fight, you know, or etc. However, Viz corrected this to mean real fight, as the word tatakai can mean war, battle, or fight, and is more serious than, say, a word like a bout. Saitama then follows this up with a serious punch, and one actually corrects and looks over all of the dialogue in the manga version that Murata gives to him to make sure it's all good and consistent. This means he approved the statement of Saitama saying that Boros was almost a fight or real fight, if you consider Viz the translation authority, or Saitama even looks rather excited when he comes back.
That's actually an interesting discussion, because for me personally, I've always, when it comes to the Viz translation, while yes, they are pretty good, at the same time, people have pointed out that they sometimes, like, the way they translate things, they sometimes miss the context that the author was trying to convey to us, you know, the readers. Like, a lot of people have pointed out that sometimes Viz will change things, I guess you could say. And I've talked before on this channel where sometimes Viz will also censor things, which I still have no idea why they do this. Because I hate censorship. I hate it. I don't.
Back to Earth with a smile on his face during this fight, shocked he made it back from the moon, and even talks about how strong Boros was to Genos. From here, Saitama...
Hold on, what does it say?
Even talks about how strong Boros was to Genos.
Oh, I accidentally said Garo. Oh, okay, so he corrected it in the editing. Okay.
From here, Saitama beats Boros, but it is not made to be funny, and in no way was Saitama walking away from Boros drawn with heavy detail supposed to be considered a gag. The line from Boros, "You are too strong," was supposed to be a sad thing for Saitama, as Boros had just lived Saitama's dream. Even in the anime watered down version, they tried to use a sad piano for this scene, and the panels showing Saitama's face are never drawn comedically, which are more obvious, say, with the OK scene. It's not the same energy. Saitama even lies to Boros to try and hype up how it was a good fight, like the prophecy said it would be, but Boros calls him out as a liar. Saitama did not beat Boros because it was funny. He beat Boros because he was too strong. And in the original draft by Murata...
And that's, again, see, all that stuff just adds to why Saitama is such an interesting character, and I feel like a lot of people kind of miss that, because yeah, it did start off as a joke, just like I think a lot of series, you know, they start off a bit more lighthearted, but then it slowly starts to take a more serious tone, but also never forgetting, you know, its roots, where every now and then it'll remind you, like, this is not supposed to be taken 100% seriously. Excuse me. But yeah, moments like this remind you of kind of how boring Saitama's life actually is. Like, he'll consistently come against opponents that are strong, and he thinks, oh, well, I finally have a chance to get like an actual exciting fight. But it never turns out that way. Like, it never lives up to his expectation, because even though they're strong, and they're stronger than, you know, the average villain that he's used to fighting, where he would just kill them with one hit, at the end of the day, they're still not enough for him to genuinely try, for him to genuinely fight. It's just not enough. And this moment with Boros, yeah, it was a sad moment. Like, it wasn't meant to be taken as a gag.
When he drew this fight in the manga, he was forced by one to remake it numerous times because he made Boros too clown-like when he started losing, and not dignified enough when he fought Saitama. One actually went out of his way to make Boros have dignity against Saitama and to make it more serious, yet it's supposed to be funny? Something similar happens later with Human Monster Garo, in which Saitama is hoping that Garo can keep powering up like Boros and is happy when Garo can take some blows from him, but becomes disappointed as well and talks about how Garo is kind of doing what he does, being a villain instead of a hero for fun. Two limit-breaking opponents fight Saitama, and he doesn't just beat them in one punch to be funny. This argument definitely just doesn't hold up later after the first sets of chapters. Maybe if the story kept going with the same flow as the first chapters, this would make sense, but a lot of One Punch Man is about Saitama trying to discover his humanity, and while he's funny, and he's a contrast to the bleak world around him, he doesn't win just because it's funny, so nor do I think he'd beat Goku because it's funny. A pretty ignorant claim, no offense. Read the manga, learn what some words are, visit a library for once in your lives maybe. Jokes. The other argument is obviously the name One Punch Man, in which I technically went over already as being based on his power being endgame, and everyone else being early game, so he one-shots them and gets bored. But even then, this is still contentious, even with the actual staff behind the series, and not agreed on. So why are the fans acting like it's agreed on? Yusuke Murata, the artist, once came out and said what he thinks the ending of One Punch Man will be, and in this breakdown, Yusuke says that he thinks the strength of Saitama doesn't come from just his limiter breaking, but from the powers of God as well, and at the end of the series he will fight and defeat God, then losing his powers. After he loses his powers, he still remains as a hero, but then gets defeated by every villain and monster in one punch, so the association then calls him One Punch Man. As you know, Saitama isn't actually referred to as One Punch Man in the story, but Caped Baldy. So Yusuke was making a gag about how Saitama might just get one tapped at the end instead. Now, I'm not saying that Yusuke's word is canon, or that's how it's actually going to end, just that the term One Punch Man isn't what a lot of fans act like it is, nor is it agreed upon. Saitama also still trains and gets stronger throughout the series, and thinks he could beat himself from yesterday, but if Saitama could beat anybody, then why can't he beat himself from the future? Is there some kind of Saitama plus rule to Saitama's omnipotent fiction soloing level punches? Once again, unlikely. Also, did you guys seriously forget that he trained to get his powers, or not only illiterate but maybe blind? But even in the battle with Boros, with the almost a real fight statement I brought up earlier, or almost a fight statement, if Boros was strong enough to, say, vaporize a star, using the One Punch Man compass, which most people think is mistranslated or he can't actually do, and that's enough to almost be a fight or real fight to Saitama, how would Saitama, who's beyond spatial dimensions and can obliterate almost anybody in fiction, some who could kill Boros by simply existing in the same multiverse, at all think Boros was remotely competent or almost fight-like? Even if Saitama went very easy on him, if he's multiple levels of infinity higher than him, the statement, "this is almost a fight," doesn't make any sense. In terms of narrative, One Punch Man is rather unique as well, with many characters turning into what they surround themselves with or heavily desire, whether it be monsters or whatever have you. Garo and Saitama are great examples of this. If Saitama's ultimate goal is to have an intense and great fight with all his powers, as his dreams at the beginning of the series suggest, then would it not make sense for him to eventually create or find a reality in which that is possible?
True.
Say Saitama wished to be weak enough to lose, would he not eventually lose? Who's to say Goku couldn't be the ultimate opponent that Saitama was looking for, that could give him a good fight like his dreams wanted?
Exactly.
There's too many confusing details to say objectively Saitama would win based off these types of arguments. All said and done, is it impossible for Saitama to beat Goku? No, absolutely not. Saitama could very well watch Goku go Super Saiyan 3 or Ultra Instinct Kaioken times 100, say, okay, and then one-shot him or something. Who knows? But to say that One Punch Man is purely a gag story is pretty disrespectful to the actual story and author, and it seems to ignore what the story really is pretty heavily. I'd say at the end of the day, maybe in a few years, Saitama comes out and shows a feat that makes us really believe he could just defeat Goku. But not because he's a gag character and Goku is stinky, shiny, over-the-top shonen guy, but because he's a character like many others whose powers simply start at the beginning instead of the end, and he has much more to show us.
So yeah, that's the video right then and there. So I mean, look, he did bring up a lot of interesting points. I mean, for me personally, again, I think you guys said it. Maybe this video, or maybe I didn't. Saitama right now cannot defeat Goku. He can't. Now, does this mean that he'll, like what Seth said, does it mean that he'll never be strong enough to beat Goku? Well, we don't know. I mean, up until this point, like, Saitama continuously goes up against these insanely powerful opponents, and he never looks like he needs to be 100% serious. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he'll say, this is like a serious punch, but it's like their power is never enough for him to say, okay, I need to take this seriously because I could actually die here. That's never been the case. And I don't think I don't think that ever will be the case until, at least not until like the literal very end of the series, like the very last fight that Saitama will ever have, the last serious fight that Saitama will ever have. I don't think we're ever going to see that. I think that Saitama is just someone who, like, I feel like the whole point of his story is like, if you were to gain all this power, then life would be really dull. Like, life would be kind of boring. I mean, he even says it himself in the actual series. It's like, there was that one panel that he showed where he says, I feel like I'm in a completely different world. And it does make sense, because right now, where he is in terms of power, it's like no one else is on his level. Like, no one else understands what it's like to be him, to be someone who is like so powerful that he actually sees the world differently. Like, everyone else looks at these world-ending events and they get panicky and they run away, which is again understandable, because I think that's what a lot of us would do. But to him, it's like, all right, whatever. It's like, it doesn't even faze him. And like I said, even what's happening now in the manga, I obviously can't go into detail because I don't want to spoil it, but he, even again, all the things that are happening around him, what his opponent is doing, it's like he doesn't care. He doesn't take it seriously. And that's the whole thing with Saitama, is like, he is constantly looking for that one person to give him that fight, to give him the thing that he's been looking for the most. And he did, mention it. It's like, if Saitama really is this limitless, multiversal, reality breaking person, then why doesn't he immediately find the one person out there who could actually give him a genuinely good fight? Excuse me. Sorry about that. I had to take care of something. But yeah, again, it's like, I feel like, people, I do agree that people who say that Saitama is just like, he's supposed to be a gag character or whatever, are kind of disrespecting Saitama, and they're disrespecting the actual story in and of itself. I feel like people who, again, people who don't take this story at least seriously enough are doing a disservice to the One Punch Man story, because it is a lot better than I think people give it credit for. Like, it's not just like a gag series. That's not what it is. Like, there's a lot of work that actually goes into this story. There is, and I feel like people need to see it, because otherwise they're doing themselves a disservice by just dismissing it as a comedic series that's not meant to be taken seriously. And don't get me wrong, there are comedic elements, of course, but if you only see it as that, like I said, you're completely missing what's actually being told to you through the story. But anyway, to basically conclude this whole video and to keep it from being longer than it needs to be, as I said, I don't think Saitama can be Goku now. I don't. Now, whether he will be in the future, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, sorry, I just thought I heard something. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna have to end this video right here. While you're here, please, like I said, consider leaving a like, share this video out there, hit the subscribe button if you haven't, ring the bell for notifications, and I hope I'll see you for my next video. Bye for now.